Good morning. Welcome back. You're still watching Daybreak on this 10th day of January 2023. So much has so far happened. It's just been about 10 days anyway. But this morning, I want us to take a look at the situation in the counties, an outlook of sorts. We'll be speaking to Senator of Homabay, that is Moses Kajwang, who is already in studio. Good morning, Mheshimiwa.
Good morning.
It's good to see you.
Nice to see you too, and I hope it's not too late to say Happy New Year.
No, it's not too late. It's just about 10 days, so Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you.
How is your start so far?
It started well. I think I've got a feeling it's going to be a good year. There are worries about global forces, but I think at the domestic level, I believe it's going to be a good year for Kenya. Great.
And of course, joining us also shortly will be the governor of Muranga County and also a former senator and former member of the National Assembly, that is Dr. Irungu Kangata. And we'll be also joined by Dr. Conrad Bosire, who is a consultant in matters devolution and governance. As soon as they're here, we'll be in a position to bring them on board. But also looking this morning on the papers, a graft roadblock for job seekers is the main story on the Daily Nation. This is a story that I had mentioned to you. But also there's a story I told you about that is on page 6 of the Daily Nation that is also interesting to look at. Gachagua will seize assets of graft-tainted Uhuru allies, cartels owned banks, controlled interest rates, and public policy was designed to earn them handsome profits. That's according to the deputy president. And there's a quote here. They were telling Kenyans not to vote for thieves, yet they were the real thieves. They had started subdividing public land among themselves. And of course, he was speaking to Inoro TV on Sunday to Francis Gashuri in an interview that night. And then new law to give EACC power to vet all civil service job seekers. This is a story that is on page 7 of the Daily Nation. Proposals are that changes to the law seek to make recommendations by EACC binding to national and county governments, and currently only candidates in senior ranks of public service are vetted, and EACC recommendations are advisory. But now the proposal is to have it binding on the recruiting bodies to ensure that there's some form of a cleanup on those matters in the recruitment of different public officers. And now we have been joined by the governor of Muranga County, Dr. Irungu Kangata. Good morning, Governor.
Good morning, Sam and my friend.
Great. We'll be fixing your sound shortly so that you can be in a position to hear you. But Dr. Conrad Bosire, good morning.
Good morning, Sam.
And it's good to see you. Thank you for making time for us. I had started by asking Senator how the year has started. How is yours?
Started well, the usual challenges, but optimistic that the year will be fine, successful.
Okay, all right. And of course, I want us to begin straight away by talking about the outlook in 2023. And let me begin with you, Senator Kajwang, because towards the end of 2022, we saw the Senate making a decision in a matter that was involving the governor of Meru, that is Kawira Mwangaza, and of course, the Senate threw out the impeachment because none of those allegations were confirmed by the select committee. What for you stood out that we need to look out for? Because it was just about 3 or 4 months into office for Kawira Mwangaza, yet she has had so much trouble with the MCAs. What are the real concerns that must be addressed by the different forces?
Thank you, Sam. The Senate undertook the first impeachment in this parliament, and unfortunately it came too early, probably came too soon, just a few months after a governor had been elected. The Senate, in its wisdom, found that the charges that were brought before it were not substantiated. But the key thing is that even if there were issues within that county, the Senate has set a very high threshold for impeachment. It is not every rumor, it is not every misdemeanor that is going to lead to impeachment. And I think progressively the Senate has established a precedent, has enriched our jurisprudence, and has defined a threshold that will guide other county assemblies and other counties whenever they've got disputes with their governors. There is no leader and there is no governor who is perfect, not even my friend Irungu Kangata. Every government must have a little bit of imperfection here and there. We are not saying that any single imperfection should find its way before the Senate for impeachment. There must be approaches to dispute resolution, And county assemblies must be encouraged to find alternative ways of resolving issues between them and governors whenever they arise without resorting to impeachment. I think Senate going forward will still insist on a very high threshold for impeachment. We also think that we probably might put in law a time frame within which a governor or an impeachment motion should not be brought before the Senate. You know, there's this theory of group formation, forming, storming, and norming. And whenever you have a new governor in a county, the governor, he or she will go through those stages. There'll be a storming stage where people are trying to find ways of understanding each other and working with each other. And within the first 6 months, you find that many of the times the county assemblies and governors are disagreeing on issues like appointments, on issues like even things like committee leadership within the county assemblies sometimes causes strife between the county assemblies and the governors. So hopefully we can see a situation where governors are given at least 6 months or 1 year to be able to settle down. However, if there are serious constitutional violations, and if there are serious illegalities committed by a governor, I think even if they are committed on the 3rd day of assumption of office, those then should be considered. But Senate must be above the fray. Senate must consider itself like the Supreme Court when it comes to issues of impeachment. We have had a conversation internally. We saw some members of the Senate look like they were supporting the governor. And when the governor was acquitted, we saw some of them, joining in the celebrations. We have had an internal conversation, and we have agreed that the Senate and senators sit as judges when it comes to impeachment. And so we must be, we cannot be seen to be celebrating with defendants or celebrating with plaintiffs. And as we go forward, I don't think Kenyans will be subjected to such scenes where a section of the Senate is either celebrating or mourning the outcome of an impeachment decision.
Right. And Governor, now that we have your mic sorted out, I had asked you how the year is, but you may also tell us about the situation in Muranga, because you're seeing your neighbor in Homabay County is facing some challenges with the members of the county assembly. How has it been for you forming a government the first 4 or so months?
Thank you so much, Sam, and also my fellow panelists, including my friend Senator, who served with him in the Senate. I think it is you who should be commenting about it, as opposed to me talking about myself. There is a Kikuyu saying that he who talks about himself must talk good. So I think you should be commenting.
No, you tell me about your experience. I mean, you've not been a governor ever until you were elected in August.
Well, what I can say, being a governor requires some special sets of skills, which are a little bit unique and different from those required for one to serve effectively as a legislature. Reason being, you are on the executive branch of government, you are executing decisions, you are basically a CEO, and there you are exercising power in what I would call fairly as a single person. But when you're in a legislature, you're exercising power in a collegiate manner because you're a member of a larger group of persons. So to that extent, there are some skills that you need to really hone and to develop that include being more consultative, that including triangulating information so that whatever decision you make is a decision that has been well researched and thought through. And also you do a lot of background studies. Most people will give you a lot of information which can be distorted at times or half-baked. So it is your work as a governor to always cross-check by reading and consulting in an in-depth manner. Mm-hmm. Yes, for me, I think that's what our experience is for that period of being the Muranga governor. And finally, being a little bit focused. Mm-hmm. I think it is important to always remember what promises you give to your people, mm-hmm, and immediately commence implementing that set of promises. Right. You may be tempted to get out of whatever you promise the people, I think that's a danger. But if you were to just focus, that would really help you. For instance, in Muranga, we were basically promising 3 issues. And number 1, it was what we call community projects at the grassroots level. Secondly, healthcare. And thirdly, agriculture. And so far, the efforts that we have done are mainly geared those 3 manifesto agendas. And the other issue is to really consult and appreciate the role done by other entities that superintend devolution. Those institutions include like the control of budget. You can have a budget which you cannot even implement. Yeah, it was passed by the assembly, but once you start implementing, the control budget will always ask you for this and this other document. So I think a governor, from where I see it, really needs to be a person who really understands how government works.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting. I'll come back for more. Dr. Conrad, so because you've been able to watch formation of 3 governments now at the county level, that is the first one in 2013, then 2017-18, and now 2022-2023, are you seeing as a consistent pattern? Because every new governor comes with their own promises, like he says, they have a manifesto, they have a plan. But there are also challenges because MCAs come with their thoughts because they're representatives of the people. What are those challenges that consistent through it all that you think now these systems have to keep planning?
Oh, thank you very much. You're right. We are at the 3rd, if I can call it, generation of county governments. And maybe let me just say that at this point in time, we are starting to have some form of stability in governance. You can't compare with the chaos and the transition that was there at the beginning. But also you are right that with every transition, there comes some form of disruption, which is expected when there is a transition in place. Maybe on that point, what we need to do as a country is to think more and more about frameworks of governance, laws, and policies, which will enable governance processes, especially development activities, investments which have been made in services, not to be disrupted as a result of transitions, political transitions. If I may give an example, there is a time when there was a proposal in the laws to have the terms of service of ward administrators to be aligned with the mandate of the governor, that the governor comes in with a ward administrator and leaves with that. Maybe you can call that politicization of the county public service, because these are public officers, and that was not a solution, and I'm glad that that legislative proposal didn't go through. Maybe what we need is a professional county public service which serves whichever governor comes into office after election, and there's a defined government agenda. Of course, the governor can come up with their own manifesto, commitments to citizens, but still within a broader level of stability. And talking of stability, and what Senator Kajuang has just mentioned here, I've also seen that pattern of stabilization of impeachment of governors. If you may recall, when they passed the County Governments Act, the current Prime Cabinet Secretary was the then Minister for Local Government. And one of the reasons they said they're vesting the powers of impeachment of governors in the Senate was because they felt that if the power 100% is vested in the county assemblies, then they would see what we used to see with the impeachment of mayors back then when they were, so they thought if we vest this in the Senate, another level of government, which is far from the county governments, maybe that separation will create some form of stability. In the early days of these impeachments and some of the impeachments which happened in the last term, I had some skepticism about that, But slowly, and if you look at the rulings of the committees which are presented and the reasons given for that, you can actually see evidence of what Senator Kajwang was talking about. There is some seriousness given to thresholds of evidence, the procedures. Of course, there are some challenges in there, especially when national politics kick in. But we must give credit. The Senate has tried to stabilize its decision-making on impeachment matters. Maybe just one comment on the impeachment process. There is the impeachment procedures bill, which somehow fell through. It was commenced from the Senate when Governor Irungu Kangata was there. One of the things they need to do is public participation in the impeachment process. Of course, there's some of that requirement in the impeachment process, but mainly it's the decision of the Senate. Sometimes the threshold of that public participation. So maybe options for reform is to ensure, because electing a governor and losing a governor of a county through impeachment is a heavy process.
Right.
So maybe those are some of the things which can be considered in the legislative agenda. But overall, in this third generation of county governments, some things are beginning to crystallize. But we still have challenges. In the cabinet retreat, you had the chair of the Council of Governors talk about laws which still impede county governments from performing their functions, but with goodwill, especially from the two levels of government and institutions. I'm sure those will be streamlined, and it will not be a one-day affair. It's a process that continues and smoothens itself. Yeah.
Right. And Senator Kajwang, still at the formation stages of this conversation, let me take you back home. And of course, Homabay had its first transition from a governor to another in the last election. How is the situation? I know your governor is still facing election petition, but still at the formation of the government, how have you seen it in terms of establishing the institutions and the officers that need to be recruited?
The case of Homabay highlights the inequalities across the country in terms of some counties having gone ahead of others over the last 10 years. I must say that Homabay was probably did not do as well as many other counties in the first 10 years of devolution, as far as service delivery was concerned, and as far as unleashing productivity of the population of Homabay was concerned. The beautiful thing about devolved governments is that governors served a fixed term, not exceeding 10 years, and that allows you to inject freshness in leadership at the county level. We have that element of freshness in Homabay, and recently my governor addressed herself to what she has been able to achieve within the 100 days, and I think that she's on the right trajectory to ensuring that we go beyond the mundane issues of setting up a county government. We transition to service delivery and ultimately to enhancing productivity. What I would like to see county governments doing more is that when a new governor takes over, the way Governor Kangata has taken over, you have a baseline and you ask yourself, when I took over, what was the gross county product of Muranga County or Homabay County? And what is your intention in the next 5 years or 10 years? You see, it's been 10 years of devolution. Each county should now be held to account. To what extent have you improved the productivity of your people? I'm glad that Irungu Kangata has agriculture as the third plank of his manifesto. And those of us who come from Homabay, there's something we admire about Muranga. Because if you look at issues of household wealth or household poverty, if a household has a cow or a household has got something that puts money in the pocket, it means that the average resident of Muranga, their per capita income is probably higher than in many other parts of the country where they do not have an income generating activity, they don't have a cow, they don't have an acre of tea or an acre of coffee sitting somewhere. We'd really like to see governors focusing more, not just on mundane issues like HR. Unfortunately, if you look at almost half of the new governors, their first priority has been on HR audit. Fine, it's okay. There were ghost workers and there were all sorts of unqualified people who were employed by past regimes. But that is not it. That is not the end. That should just be the means to ensuring that you've got an efficient administration that can provide optimized services in healthcare, optimized services when it comes to early childhood education, optimized services when it comes to extension services for workers. ultimately this should lead to greater productivity. Counties are complaining about inadequate resources to finance the functions that have been allocated to them. We know that this year, even though we said it's going to be a good year, there'll be serious global forces that are going to batter Kenya. There's a global recession that is looming. There is a tightening of Kenya's budget, budget approach. The president is saying he's not going to borrow money from lenders or from other markets, that we have to make do with the little that we have. It is foreseeable that counties would probably continue to get the 370 billion that they got in the past years. If there is that squeeze when it comes to allocations to county governments, governors must now start being creative, not just by increasing taxation, but increasing productivity, because it is from productive activities that taxes can be paid. And that I think, for me, should be what I would call the third phase of devolution. The first phase was setting up institutions. The second phase ought to have been optimizing services. The third phase now should be to promote productivity within the counties.
Promote productivity in the counties. And Governor, still in Muranga County, what situation did you find there, and what are you having to deal with as you establish your administration that is seeking solutions and to even achieve what you promised the voters in Muranga?
I think the first thing I noted is that there were no structures, or rather those structures that were there, they needed to be upgraded and enhanced. Let me not really speak about my predecessor, because
no, you're not.
It is always respectful not to defame your past colleague. But be that as it may, we really wanted to put in structures and procedures to the way of doing things, because the government is basically a structure. Yeah, as I think it was called Max Weber is the one who says about a bureaucracy. And therefore, we started with automating the government. That way, you boost county revenue. We started with a pilot in Muranga Town. So we established automation for hospital fees, for parking in Muranga Town, and also at one quarry called Kadudu in Muranga Town. And then we went to Matatu, automation for Matatu payments. Then on 1st of January 2023, we made an announcement that 5 revenue streams will now be fully automated in the entire county. And we are glad that automation was not done through a procurement process. We just employed a software engineer who did all those programs as part of his mandate. And through that, we saved money and we were able to increase the revenue. A good example would be the hospital fees. That we used to collect about 70,000, 80,000 per day in Muranga Hospital. We are now collecting almost 200,000 or 250,000 on any day. When it comes to parking, we used to collect about 38,000 per day. In Muranga Town, we are now collecting about 60,000. And also you reduce the cost of getting that money, because the money is now going directly into a bank account where there are no intermediaries. And therefore, there has been a lot of improvement of efficiencies. Anytime from now, in the next 1 or 2 weeks, single business permit will also be obtainable through automation methods. And again, also jobs application in Muranga, people are no longer bringing physical copies. People are doing it online. And I think by the time in 1 or 2 years, Muranga we should be fully automated, so that we increase productivity, we increase revenues and efficiencies in government operations. The other issue has been healthcare. We found a county that procures drugs almost 100% from the private sector. That then meant you pay more money for drugs. You then have fewer drugs to cater for the disease burden for Muranga people. We were able to flip that by now buying almost exclusively from KEMSA. Of course, we know KEMSA at times cannot give you 100% of all requirements. So the first point of call has been buy from KEMSA. If you don't get all the drugs from KEMSA, that's when you can now revert to other players. The other issue, of course, is the engagement we now did with the NHIF. We realize out of 10 households in Muranga, only about 3 have NHIF card. And again, even those who have NHIF card, it is what we call the normal NHIF card, whose benefits are very limited. So we entered into an MOU with NHIF. We paid them almost 163 million and we negotiated a special package that has unique features for the benefit of the people of Muranga. So that covers about 20,000 households. And it has 4 benefits. Mainly, number 1 is outpatient and inpatient cover, just like the normal NHIF cover. But there are 3 extra unique benefits which don't apply to normal NHIF cover. Number 1 is dental. Under our cover, the 20,000 households can go and get dental services. Number 2 is the optical. Again, the normal NHIF cover doesn't have optical cover, but ours does have, meaning you can go and even exchange your glasses using that insurance cover. Now, finally, and most importantly, I would imagine, is what we call the last expense cover, which means that if for any reason, of course, we don't want a person-to-person in Muranga, but if you are to get into that misfortune, you can now claim for parents, whether in-laws or your parents, 50,000 shillings. If it is a spouse or yourself or a dependent, a child, gets 100,000 to defray your burial expenses and to mitigate other social issues that may arise out of the passing of a loved one.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'll get to more. But when you say inpatient, outpatient, what are the limits?
They are the normal NHIF limits, you know, the kind of coverage. But the advantage of ours is that, number 1, you can roam, meaning it's not restricted in Muranga County. With our card, you can go to Garissa, Mombasa, Nairobi, and get services. Number 2 is also not limited to public hospitals. It is you to choose whether you want to go to Muranga or Kenneth Matiba Hospital in Muranga, or even a private hospital, a faith-based hospital like Kireine Mission Hospital or AIC Githumu in Kandara. So we are not restricting people to public facilities. Okay. Because I said, it is upon us as a governor to improve our services, to lure people into our facilities, so that people...
So is it contributory, or it's just by the government?
It's purely by the government. People are not paying a single shillings. Okay. Of course, we aimed at the most vulnerable people for now. That is the elderly, the single parents, households with children with disabilities. Of course, there are several other households which are yet to be covered. We hope once the Assembly does the substantive budget in June, we'll definitely increase the amount that has been dedicated to that program so that we can cover more and more households. Okay. And of course, incidentally, it is a revenue-generating stream, incidentally. Reason being, vast majority of the beneficiaries will come back and seek services from public institutions in Muranga, and then we shall then claim from NHIF. Okay. And therefore, it's a potential revenue earning stream for the county government. Okay,
I hear you, and I want us to take a short break. When we return, we'll continue the conversation about devolution outlook in 2023, some of the challenges that counties are facing or the governments are facing, but also what is unique in the counties represented here after the break. Stay tuned.